I'm actually not going to introduce our speaker, Maziar Bahari. I'm going to have somebody else introduce. And what's so amazing about Sinai Temple is that so many of our members have amazing Wikipedia biographies. And one of them is Deborah Oppenheimer, who's been a longtime member at Sinai Temple and very accomplished in her own right, and also very active with the United States Holocaust Museum. And so I'll just tell you a little about Deborah, an American film and television producer, won an Academy Award in 2001 for Best Documentary Feature for producing Into the Arms of Strangers, the stories of the Kinder Transport. If you haven't seen that, please also watch that. It's an amazing, amazing film. Also, Deborah co-authored a companion book for the film with Mark Jonathan Harris and produced the film's soundtrack. Also from upstate New York in my neighborhood, and went to Buffalo State University with a degree in English secondary education, a very, very extensive resume of film and TV and entertainment, but also we're here today to talk about the Holocaust and Holocaust education. Past board member of the United States Holocaust Museum in 2012, Deborah was selected by a member of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council by President Obama. And also another feature-length documentary that I have the opportunity to see, Foster, received the National Council for Adoption's Excellence in Foster Care Media Award in November 2019. That is why I love this place, because we have amazing members of our community that make a difference in this world, and I get to share their stories. So without further ado, Deborah Oppenheimer, who will introduce Maziar Bahari.
I think that Maziar has already been introduced a couple of times, so I won't add to that what's already been said, but I will say that I think it's fantastic that this program is being presented here. Rabbi Sherman read an article in the Beverly Hills Courier, not a publication that so many people read in its entirety, and saw the article about the Sardari project and Maziar and had the idea to bring it here to this congregation. So I'm really proud to be a member of a congregation where there's a rabbi like Rabbi Sherman, who is so innovative and forward-thinking and would have these ideas to get people to think more broadly and more widely. I also just want to say about Maziar, from having served 2 terms on the U.S. Holocaust Museum Council, where I do still serve on one of the committees, that the museum does not take on partnerships lightly. They think very seriously about their name, their reputation, and their mission. So for them to have engaged with Maziar on the Sardari project, which he'll speak to you about today, and also to bestow upon him their highest award, the Elie Wiesel Honor, was a tremendous compliment indeed. I was driving over here and talking to a good friend of mine about the program and talking about Maziar, and I used the word hero, that he's heroic, and it's not a word that I use very often in describing someone, so I'm very, very honored to be able to introduce the heroic Iranian Canadian journalist, producer, and many other things, Maziar Bahari.
So I have a couple of questions. I have a couple of questions I was given that we can start conversation, and hopefully maybe we can talk a little about what's happening in the world today as well, if you're comfortable with that, and then we'll go from there. So a couple of people have asked me, in the Ashkenazic world, the Holocaust is our story. In the Persian world of Iranian Jewry, just like the Persian story was not necessarily my story until I met this congregation, what part of the Holocaust was, for you growing up as somebody who was not Jewish, but Jewish Iranian as well, is or was part of that story? Or is this completely something new to them?
Well, thank you again for inviting me. It's a bit of a complicated story, and I can make the long story boring, but I'm going to make it a bit.
We want excitement.
Short. So
a little closer.
I grew up in Iran in the 70s, and even in the I don't think that even in the U.S. that many people knew about the Holocaust in the 70s until the TV series Holocaust was shown on TV, and people learned about it. But I loved films and I loved TV shows, and especially I like two films, The Great Escape and Guns of Navarone, that I'm sure many of the people have seen. Yeah, you've seen that. And the Guns of Navarone, for people who lived in Iran in the 70s, and even Great Escape, they used to show it almost every month on Iranian TV. And, you know, with Anthony Quinn and Gregory Peck. And I was fascinated with this story, and David Niven. And I was fascinated with this story, and I wanted to know more about it. And my family was a bit different as well, and I think that made me more interested in the story as well. So my father grew up, my father and mother both, they grew up during the Second World War. The area in the north of Iran where my mother lived was occupied by the Soviets, and my father's place of birth, Bahar, which is close to the city of Hamadan, was occupied by the British. And in those days, you had two choices. You would either fight against the British by joining the Nazis and be a German sympathizer, or you would join the Communist Party. And my father joined the Communist Party in the late 40s, and he became a union leader, etc. And in that time, all around the world, the Jews were very prominent in communist parties, not only in Iran, but also in different places. But in Iran, it was, there were many Jews in the Communist Party because it was the only party that accepted Jews without prejudice. So there were many, so my father had a friend named Israel Cohen. And I don't think you can get a more Jewish name than, you know, Israel Cohen.
We have a couple of those.
Well, maybe, yeah, Jewish, maybe that would be another name. But yeah, Israel Cohen was a very good friend of my father. And, you know, and he was a member of the Communist Party as well. So everyone who comes from a communist family, and, you know, they call them the red diaper babies, they are kind of fascinated with the history of Holocaust and Jews, because also Marx was born Jewish, and, you know, Trotsky was Jewish. So I grew up trying to learn about it. And then I moved to Montreal to study. And when I learned about and you know, in Canada, as in here, there is a very prominent Jewish community. And I didn't know anything about the discrimination against the Jews, that, you know, even at McGill University, where I was studying, there was a quota for Jewish students. So I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to do something that combined my interest in the immigrant population and the Holocaust, and then I made the film about the St. Louis as my last year university thesis, and then I pitched it to a professional producer, and then I made it as my first film. So that is the short story of my fascination with the Holocaust. And then when I went back to Iran in 1998, after 12 years, I knew that I wanted to work in Iran, and I didn't want to, you know, the government to revoke my journalist card, the press card. And I knew that I had to avoid certain subjects, and Israel and the Holocaust was one of those subjects that I avoided while I was in Iran for 12 years.
While you were avoiding them, were you also learning about it sort of quietly, or?
While I was avoiding, but I was learning more. I mean, when I lived in Canada and the UK, I learned a lot about the Holocaust. I mean, I met hundreds of people for research on the St. Louis, and also the film was toured in different places. So I went to Israel in 1995, 96. I didn't tell the Iranian authorities. So when I was arrested in Iran in 2009, and I knew that I could not, and released, and I knew that I could not go back to Iran anymore, I tried to do whatever I could not do while I was in Iran. And the Sardari project and working on the Baha'i issues and others were, you know, the result of that. One of the first films I made was a film for the BBC called From Cyrus to Ahmadinejad, that basically examined the story of Iranian relationship with Jews and Israel from the time of Cyrus the Great to Ahmadinejad, and I'm here now.
Cyrus was a little better, right?
Yes, yeah. I know that people refer to a certain politician here now, some people as Cyrus the Great, but let's not.
We don't want to lose our 501c3, so we're going to move on to the next question. But just take us through your story of imprisonment in the Evin prison. I'm just fascinated. I'm almost done with the book. Again, Then They Came for Me.
Sorry, I'm giving up the ending for you.
Oh, no. I've watched also the movie, so it's really neat to match that. It seems like you kept pushing almost that, there were definitely signs of this could have happened to you. People said, like, you better leave after this, you better leave after that. You would call your wife Paula, who's here, by the way. Thank you, Paula, for coming, who's British. And while I believe you were having your child, who's also here, what made you just continue? Maybe talk a little bit about that. For me, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you know what? Let others tell the story. I'll get out of here, and when it's done, I'll come back.
So when I made the St. Louis story in '94, I realized that I was in a very unique situation, that I was Iranian, technically Muslim, non-Jewish, and I empathized with the plight of Jews and talked about the whole story of Holocaust. And I saw that the reception to my film was different from other films about the Holocaust that Jewish filmmakers made. So that gave me a sense of responsibility that I can maybe somehow translate these narratives, and that's what I was talking about during the service, that, try to understand other people's narratives, but also translate it for others who may not be aware of it. So when I was in Iran, when I went back to Iran, I realized that, again, I was in a unique situation, that I had the opportunity to work with the Western media, Newsweek magazine, BBC, etc., different, making films, writing articles about Iran, as it's not reported on 6 o'clock news, that, you get only 30 seconds or 2 minutes about, the most superficial stories about Iran. So I thought that I should explore, but at the same time, I was cautious. I was cautious as much as I could be, but I wrote an article, I think about a year before my arrest, saying that working in Iran as a journalist is like working as a tightrope walker, that you always have to be careful not to fall, but when you get to the other side, it's exhilarating, it's satisfying, and it really that gives you a sense of accomplishment. So I was pushing the envelope, but I was cautious. But then, with tightrope walkers, you never know. Sometimes there's something on the rope or something that you fall, and I guess I fell, and in 2009, because of their conspiracy, not because of what I did. And, that led to my arrest and being charged with espionage, which was a ridiculous charge. And, when you see the film or when you read the book, you see to what ridiculous length they went to in order to incriminate me. And, in the absence of any real evidence, they have to resort to anything. And I think after a month, they just gave up that, they knew that I was not a spy. So they changed tactic, and they put me under pressure to confess to other things. And I knew that if I made the confession the way they wanted, that would be the end of me. So that the hardship really came from this conflict between them trying to squeeze this confession out of me and me trying to diplomatically circumvent what they wanted to do. But at the end of the day, I knew that the interrogator, like any other bureaucrat, because the interrogators, they're just part of this government machinery. Like when you have the intelligence organization or even IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, you have the commanders, you have the soldiers, but you also have bookkeepers. You also have accountants, you have dentists, you have teachers, and they have torturers. So my torturer, the interrogator, I knew that it's part of the machinery, that he has a boss. So I had to tell him certain things that could satisfy his curiosity, but try to avoid what he wanted me to confess that I knew would have very, very serious consequences for me.
So I want to get to the Sardari project in one moment, but over this last 300 days since the Gaza war and Evan Gershkovich, and then I just read a book about Brittany Griner, and to hear first-person accounts of what it's like to be in these hellholes of the Evin prison and in Russia. But then you talk about like you knowing their game of what to do and what to say. What part of you thought that, you know what, this is what I need to do in order to get back home to my family?
Each individual circumstance is different from the other one, and it can change hour by hour. So I didn't know what was their game. I had to guess. And sometimes, your guess is right. Sometimes your guess is wrong. But what I realized with the interrogator, and also I had to deal with many Iranian officials in the past, that, these people, they may be part of a monstrous regime, they may commit monstrous acts, but they're not monsters. They are human beings. They are human beings who are serving a monstrous regime. And as a result, you can maybe communicate with them on a human level. You can communicate. And I think it's true about every, every authoritarian government and every authoritarian regime, because I've been to Syria, I've been to Cuba, Iraq, and you see that, people are serving a bad, monstrous regime or government, but they're not bad people, many of them. Yes, someone who is an interrogator and making a living from torturing people, and they're mostly he, I'm not being sexist, they're he usually, he is sadistic, most probably. But, he's sadistic person, he's a sadistic human being who has certain, loves. What was really weird was that when he was interrogating me sometimes, and he was...
This is Rosewater, right?
Yes, Mr. Rosewater, which I called in the book. And he was interrogating me, and he was squeezed, like his soft torture was like squeezing my ear, and sometimes he was doing that while talking to his wife, asking, how is she doing, because he was working overtime, and she was lonely, I guess, and then I was like, my God, I was like, be quiet, I'm talking here. And it's a ridiculous situation, but it's a very human situation. He is... he obviously loved his wife. His wife obviously loved him. But at the same time, he is working for this, really evil regime. So you cannot, I think you have to differentiate between people and the individuals within each regime.
And so what does Holocaust denial actually look like? Not in the 2-minute clips on TV that we see in the news. We don't really hear much about that. We're mostly talking about the nuclear Iran and the negotiations between our government and their government. What does that look like? And then when you got out of prison and you start the Iran Wire and then go through the Sardari project, how did you think, I can make a small dent in this very difficult situation?
Exactly, and I think a small dent is the important concept here, because I think the older you get, that your impact is very, very limited. And I think that's good, because excuse me, when you see the actions that have had large impact, like invasion of Iraq or Afghanistan or the fall of Gaddafi, none of them have had a positive impact in the long term. But when you make these small steps and small impacts, educate one person, educate a group of people, enlighten a certain group of people about other people's tragedies, narratives, pains, that can have, I think, long-term impact and have a positive impact as well. So for me, Iranian government's Holocaust denial is very emblematic of the regime as a whole. It's a bit complicated because anti-Semitism in Iran, and for many of the Iranians in the audience, they know that it's something fabricated. Most Iranians, unlike many Arabs, they don't have any beef with the Jews or Israelis because there's no real conflict between Iran and Israel. And Iran and Israel in the 1970s and 60s and to a certain extent 50s, they were best allies in the region because they are not trusted by the Arabs, and also they don't have any direct conflict. And of course, Ben Gurion had the idea of the periphery state that, improving relation with Ethiopia and Iran and countries that are away from the neighbors. So it's a fabricated propaganda, fabricated hatred in Iran, anti-Semitism.
Would you say that's the case today when you see on the news hundreds of thousands of people in the streets? Is it uneducation?
It's fabricated, and.
But how does the fabrication lead to the people to get out there on the streets and believe that fabrication?
So when Ayatollah Khamenei or some of the leaders, they talk about the Holocaust or they talk about, they make anti-Semitic comments, they are mostly targeting people in the region, their followers in the region, in order to have influence. And I think since the start of the Gaza war, their influence has grown because of the images on TV and because of the way that they have really positioned themselves in order to take advantage of that. Those people you're talking about inside Iran, yes, some of them are believers, but there is a foundation called Imam Khomeini Foundation that has 10 million families, supporting 10 million families. And if you're talking about 10 million families, that's about like 40 million people. They are supporting them one way or another. And among that 10 million families, at least 10 million of them, their livelihood depends on Imam Khomeini Foundation. So what they do is that they say, okay, why don't you register and go to this Friday prayers, or why don't you register and go to a protest for Ismail Haniyeh or another protest, and then they get a bit of cooking oil or butter or something. So they're taking advantage of people's misery and their people's poverty in order to enhance their power. So when you see the images of hundreds of thousands of Iranians on the street, some of them, you cannot deny that some of them, they really believe in the regime. I think it's as ignorant to say that no one believes in the regime as you say that, all of these people, they believe in the regime. So it's a very complicated situation. But so why we did, we started Sardari project was mainly in order to expose people to the reality of the Holocaust and allow people to learn the lessons of the Holocaust. And for me, the period between, let's say, 1920 to 1933 is even more interesting in terms of the history of the Holocaust before Hitler came to power in 1933, and when he started his movement around 1920 is more interesting than this history like 1933 to 1941, and then the final solution to the end of the war. I think that part has talked about and that part has been analyzed, but I think the 1920 to 1933, that how Hitler managed to take advantage of the insecurities of German people, how did he manage to have effective propaganda? How did he manage to have effective alliances with industrialists? How did he manage to even present himself to certain Jewish groups and take advantage of them one by one? I think that is fascinating, and I think we can learn a lot of lessons from them. Many of the lessons I can mention, but some of the lessons I think, when I read the stories, like about maybe the Hungarian collaborators, and all of a sudden I realize, oh, this is something that happened in Iraq, for example. And there are so many, and because Holocaust is the best documented modern tragedy, and I think it's just stupid to deny it, but it's the best documented tragedy, and you can learn so much from it, showing with the evidence, with the documentary material. That is, I think, it's just, for someone as a journalist and a filmmaker, it's just the very fertile ground in order to talk about, discuss, and our audiences are growing in Iran. Like in the beginning, people were saying that it's weird, it doesn't have to do anything with the Iranians, why Holocaust for Iran? I mean, it's like talking about Khmer Rouge for an Israeli audience. Yeah. But I think our audience is learning more about them, especially when you make it relevant to people. Because our audiences, when we are showing them testimonies of Holocaust survivors or talk about Nazi atrocities, we have to fight against, not to fight against, but compete against like news about Iran, cat videos, and fashion, all that, because you have to make it relevant to people, and otherwise people are not interested. And that is our challenge, but at the same time it shows that you have to show it on a human level. And I think, and I may be controversial here, that many of the Holocaust education institutions, they have failed their mission because they have not reached the wider audience. And they have really restricted their audience to Jewish students or Jewish high schools. And it's important for Jewish kids and young Jews to know about their history, but when you talk about anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, Jews are not part of that, mostly. Mm-hmm. It's mainly, the leftists, the people in Charlottesville who said, Jews cannot replace us, and, the Arab world, etc. And you have to really cater it to that. So based on our limited resources, based on our limited power and energy, we thought that we can work on the Sardari project and produce a certain number of articles, videos, discussions about the Holocaust.
So who is seeing and reading those? And maybe do you have a few examples of, I don't know, a 7th grader in Iran that knew nothing about this, only knows anti-Holocaust denial, and then sort of saw the light from the Sardari project and transformed them into a new journey?
So I'll give you 2 examples. 95% of our audience is inside Iran. And we reached something between 72 million readers.
The other 5%.
Pardon?
Other 5% in Westwood?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, 5% here actually.
Perfect. Or here.
And it can be more than 95% because most Iranians, they use VPNs in order to get to the internet, and VPNs are usually registered outside of Iran. But with Instagram, they can get on Instagram without VPNs, and we can see 95% from inside Iran. And we have had 2 not recent, but one of them was from last year, that a group of people in a university in Shiraz, they contacted us and they said that every 3 months we choose a subject to study, but we want to dedicate the next year to studying the Holocaust, and we are using your material. And this is like a group of 30 people or so, and we want to use your material. And they even asked us to produce certain material for them. They said, well, for example, you don't have that many you don't have any stories about the boys from Brazil, the boys from Brazil, the movie, about the medical experiments. We don't have, can you talk about the reality behind that film? So, and there was another one that there was a mullah who became interested in Qom, and he wanted to know more about the religious view of the Nazis, like how did the Catholic Church work with the Nazi regime, because he had heard that the Pope and the Vatican worked with Mussolini and they were silent during the Holocaust. He wanted to know about the Catholic Church and the relationship between the Catholic Church and the Nazis.
And then maybe before we open up the questions, who is Sardari? And actually, we're the Kohanim. Right? We have a connection to the Sardaris who helped save, who was it, your mom? Her grandmother. Yeah.
I think I saw a video of her from like 15, 20 years ago. There was an interview with her when they celebrated Sardari for the book or something. I forgot, but I remember, yes, seeing the video of her.
Yes, maybe just share the importance of Sardari and why he did what he did.
Say hello to her. So Abdul Hossein Sardari was a diplomat, Iranian diplomat in Paris, who wanted to help the Jews, and he did two things that made him, some people call him the Iranian Schindler, although he has not been recognized as a righteous Gentile by Yad Vashem yet, because their Yad Vashem says that it was part of the government's policy. Sardari did not take individual action, but some people argue against it. But anyway, Sardari did two things. One was that during the occupation of France, he negotiated with Nazi authorities, German authorities, to exempt Iranian Jews from being regarded Jewish, because he said they are Jew goods, something like that. I forgot the name.
These are Iranians
exactly.
in France.
Iranians in France, exactly. So he said that these are, pardon? Jewish Iranians. He said that they are not real Jews. They are Persian Jews, and they are different Jews, and they are not as inferior as you think. And the Nazis, I guess at that time, they were really interested in having allies on the Eastern Front, so they wanted to have some sort of relationship with the Iranian government. They exempted them from persecution, and they managed to, and he managed to save many Iranian Jews. We don't know the exact number. He managed to save Iranian Jews through this trick that he pulled. And also, after that, he issued passports for many other Jews, non-Iranian Jews, as Iranian Jews, and as a result, they were not subjected to persecution. So he saved about 1,000 lives, a bit less or a bit more, we don't know, but yeah, so he saved many, many.
And so, last question for me. We're a Jewish audience, but you said this story shouldn't be told to us. So what can we do to help the Sardari project get to the people who it should get to?
Well, I think you should be in touch with our friend here. I forgot your name, sorry. Carol, and see how can you be in touch with the Holocaust Museum, and visit iranwire.com and read more about the Sardari project. And also, if you have any questions, send it to me at maziarbahari@me.com, or maziar@iranwire.com, or at info@iranwire.com, and we can tell you more about it. We're looking for any kind of information that people may have about Iranian Jews. There will be a seminar in the Holocaust Museum in September, an academic seminar about studying the Holocaust and Iranian Jewry in the museum itself, with, I think, about 10 to 15 different academics from different parts of the world. If you have any testimonies from your parents, grandparents, especially if it's related to the Holocaust, let us know during that time. So any information can be, and spread the word,
Oh, so many questions. We'll start with Ellie, who Iranian American Jewish Federation and partner and member of Sinai. I'm just going to grab the microphone so they can hear online too.
Thank you very much. First, a comment about your name and then a question. I looked up Maziar because I'd not heard it before, and apparently it means Izad Ma Negah.
Ma Izad Yar. Ma Izad Yar.
Ma Izad Yar. So essentially, may God protect you.
Someone who's protected by God and the moon,
And the moon, okay, yeah.
What does the moon can do, but yeah.
So my last name, Elish Mereni, means may God protect me. So there's a connection there somehow. But I want to ask a question about the Sardari project, because a group of us are actually working to try to get him to be recognized as a Rights Among Nations. And we've contacted Israel, and we try to ask them, what is it that's missing that would...
Do you work with Hamid Sabi?
I do.
All right, yeah.
So it's a group of us, New York, Los Angeles, London, as well as Israel. And so it's being actually reviewed. So they told us what's missing. We provided the information, and it's being studied now, and they will give us an answer later. So I would like to connect up with you to see what we can do together in that regard. So I want to thank you very much for the work that you're doing there and for everything else that you've done.
Well,
we're grateful to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, the people that you're influencing in Iran, like the Shiraz University that contacted you, aren't they concerned about being attacked by the government because of, going against their denial of a Holocaust?
They are, but the thing is about Iranian government is that they attack everyone for everything. So you can be attacked because of your hijab, you can be attacked because of the film you've made, because of the music you listen to. These days they attack people who love heavy metal, and they call them devil worshippers. So yes, they are cautious, and we try to protect them as well by using pseudonyms, etc. But they want to be educated, and they want to have this information available. So they are printing even our material, and they go to Wikipedia, and they change Wikipedia as well. So if you check Wikipedia, if you compare Wikipedia in Persian from 2 years ago, there is much more material on Wikipedia in Persian now about the Holocaust than 2 years ago. And a lot of it is either from us, the source is our content, or the primary material, primary sources that we use for our content. Yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. I have a question and a comment. To start with the question, you mentioned your fascination with the history, particularly the precursors to the Holocaust from 1920 to 1933. And my question to you, Maziar, is understanding that history of that particular time, do you see parallels to what's happening today to the Jewish communities around the world, not just in Israel, but in America and Canada, among Australia, among many places? And then from understanding the history of that time period, what can the Jewish community now glean from that history in order to prevent it from getting to that point? Because I'm not proposing that it could get there, but it very well has some parallels in that regard. The comment I have is in terms of this application to get to inducting Sardari to the Holocaust, to Yad Vashem. I would say I'd love to start a petition to get all the Jews, especially the Iranian Jews, to, because we're in the millions at this point, I'd love to see if we can support getting a petition to get that accepted.
Well, I don't know, maybe our friend can explain it better than I do, but I don't think that Yad Vashem really responds to petitions. They need to have the facts. And I've talked to Hamid, and I know that they're working on it. So I think, yeah, I don't think that petition, maybe they tell it will be counterproductive even to have a petition, so no petitions for you. And yes, yeah, we can be in touch about that later. But in terms of the 1920 to 1933, I think, yes, there are parallels between the situation of the Jewish community, but also other communities that are subjected to hate in different countries. For example, in the country where I live, in the UK, we have populist politicians. One of them you may know here, Nigel Farage, who was very much pro-Brexit. He took advantage of an incident that happened in a small city north of England, and he basically very connivingly, and I think in a way surreptitiously, managed to, and cleverly in a sense, in his own from his point of view, he managed to provoke sentiments of many people against the Muslim community in that part. And I think with the Jews, of course, Jews will not be subjected to what happened to the German Jews in the 1930s and the European Jews during the Holocaust. But I think there are many lessons to learn. And I think we have to define the, never again sentiment. Is it never again only for Jews? Is it never again for everyone? And understanding that anti-Semitism is a very particular kind of hatred, but at the same time, it's not the only kind of hatred. I think that is very important. And I think there can be, I think at that point, what really resulted in the Holocaust and the killing of 6 million Jews in Europe was the fact that the world ignored the plight of the Jews. In this country, they couldn't come to this country. Eleanor Roosevelt said that a young, cute Jewish child grows up to be an ugly adult. That is something that everyone knows about what the American government did during the Holocaust. So I think having alliances, empathizing with other people's the plight of other people. And I think, of course, strengthening, which I think the state of Israel is doing that already. That's very important. But I think strengthening and also defending yourself defending yourself is part of the answer. What's the long-term plan? I think that is very important. And I think creating alliances between different persecuted people, I think that is very important. And the world can learn so much from the history of Jews in different countries, from the Holocaust. But at the same time, I think Jews in different countries, they can learn from other people's histories and make those alliances. And unfortunately, I cannot see that happening right now. And I don't blame it only on the Jews. I don't blame it on the others. But I just think that the empathy is missing here. The empathy, the understanding, and especially understanding other people's narrative is missing. It's that why, Netanyahu says what he says, and you cannot, divorce what he says from his father, who was a Holocaust historian, and, why the Iranian government does what it does, understanding it. It's very easy to say that they're monstrous and they're bad. Of course, they're monstrous and bad. But at the end of the day, Iran is in the region. Israel is not going to be destroyed. Israel will be there. Palestinians will be there, Lebanese will be there. They have to live together. And I don't think that any politician right now, and I think they're disappointing everyone, any politician right now has a long-term plan for this coexistence. And as if they're ignoring each other. And these are it's like the Iranian government says that, Israel will be destroyed in 10 years. That was like 30 years ago. Okay, well, maybe not 10 years, and saying that, Hamas will be destroyed. Yes, Hamas will be destroyed, but it can be replaced by Islamic Jihad. Why is Hamas doing what it does? I think that is missing. I think empathy is missing. Understanding is missing. understanding narratives is missing. And I think that's what I always say, that narratives are very important. That, you know, what happened to a young Jewish person in France during the Holocaust, you know, like her grandmother, and, you know, young, you know, Jewish person in Germany. Those personal stories, understanding them is very important.
So I appreciate your emphasis on empathy. Is really important. My family came from Mashhad, and I grew up in a very emphatic environment. So I really understand what you're saying. I think most Iranians are very emphatic. But my question is, you say there's no anti-Semitism in Iran.
I never said that. I said it's not
as it's not,
let's say, rampant as in the Arab world or in other parts of the world, yeah.
because the Jews in Mashhad were forced to live as Muslims.
Of course, yeah. And Jews in Tehran were used to, you know, they could not come out during the rainy days, and they said, you know, they were going to sully others. But what I'm saying is that right now, anti-Israeli sentiments, or since, say 1979, anti-Israeli sentiments or anti-Israeli sentiments, they are fabricated because Iran really has no conflict with Israel. You know, when you talk about...
So why do they have Hezbollah and the Houthis and all this?
It's for geopolitical and for ideological gains. It's like the Islamic Republic is like an oxymoron, you know. It's not an Islamic government, it's not a republic. It's like saying that, you know, I know an interesting accountant, you know. It's like, you know, it's an oxymoron.
So do you hope that somehow it will be toppled? Do the Iranian people want this government?
It can be toppled. The situation is not tenable, but how and when and replaced by whom, that is another question. And I know that many people here, they hope for a regime change in Iran and the change of, you know, and unfortunately, the Iranian people have been their own worst enemies. Iranian opposition, they have been their own worst enemies. They do not, you know, they've been outside of Iran for 45 years. They are well-to-do, they're wealthy, they're influential, they are educated, everything. They're living democracies, but they haven't had a single political party that's been effective. They don't have any plan for the future of Iran that Iranian people can relate to. So, yes. Yeah.
2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up, and we have a chance. So, Sam and...
Maziar, thank you for coming, first of all. I was not aware of your activities, and thank you to Rabbi for bringing you here and educating me. I'm an accountant, and I'm kind of interested.
Oh, very interesting. Sorry about that.
Just kidding.
There are always exceptions.
Just kidding. You know, I want to know a little bit more about you. I want to know what was in your mind when you returned to Iran. I'll be honest with you. You know, I've been wanting to return, but I'm so concerned about when and if I ever return, what would happen to me. So I'm curious. I understand as a Muslim you feel more freedom, but you were working on a project that was directly against what the government stands for. I want to get inside your head a little bit. What was it that made you go back to Iran?
Well, the thing is that I was always thinking that I was taking calculated risks. So I started working professionally in Iran as a journalist and filmmaker with accreditation in 1998. So I had an accreditation for Newsweek magazine as a journalist, and I had the accreditation from the Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance for being a filmmaker, for being a documentary filmmaker. And I was interrogated almost every month. Every month, they would take me to a nice hotel. They would offer me tea. They told me that we know where you live and all that. So, but as I was saying earlier, I always tried not to provoke them by talking about certain subjects like the Baha'is or Israel or the Holocaust. So I was trying to be cautious. But in 2009, the regime changed somehow. It became even more vicious because people from inside the regime, they tried to change it. Like Mousavi, who was the main candidate, who did not, against Ahmadinejad, he was the prime minister for many years in Iran in the 80s. So the regime became afraid, and as a result, they resorted to certain type of persecution that they did not before. And I was not aware of it. But also, it's always a job hazard. It's like a fireman or firewoman, firefighter, that, they go to they fight fires. But sometimes things happen, and it's part of our job, and I think we have to accept it. Yeah, 2009, yeah.
Okay, one more question? Use the microphone so everybody can hear you.
Can I say Farsi?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Translate for me.
I can translate, yeah.
آقای بهاری، اینایی که شما گفتید به درد مردم ایران هم میخوره. شما هیچ کتاب فارسی هم دارین؟
So she's telling me that what you're saying can be useful for Iranians, and have you written in Persian? خب سایت ما اصلا فارسیه. سایت ما کلاً فارسیه و به انگلیسی و زبان‌های دیگه. I'm saying that Iranware is in Persian, but also in English, in Kurdish, Azerbaijani, Spanish, and Arabic.
این کتاب شما فارسی هم دارین؟
نه، کتاب فارسی نیستش، ولی سایت که داریم iranwire.com و این پروژه سرداری همش فارسی هم هستش. اصلا کلا فارسیه. Pardon me? In Hebrew, I don't think that people in Israel need to have more about the Holocaust, because this is, well, maybe they need, but I think other people are doing a very good job. But I think our audience is mainly inside Iran. Yeah.
You said you are from which part of Iran?
Tehran. Tehran. My father is from Bahar Hamadan, and my mother is from Bandar Anzali, Rasht. Yeah.
So I want to thank Maziar Bahari. I want to thank Deborah Oppenheimer. I want to thank the Beverly Hills Courier.
Thanks very much.
And I hope this is the beginning of this connection with Sinai Temple and the Sardari project. And of course, many of our families are involved with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. I believe our 7th graders from Sinai Akiba, when they go to DC each year, they take a tour. And maybe this year, actually, we can do something together with the Sardari project as well. That would be really beautiful. Shabbat Shalom. And I think if you have a moment to chat with people, you'll be able to do that as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.